And thank you to ACAMP for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be back in Alberta. This is my home province. I was a University of Alberta grad. And pleasure to have an opportunity to share my experience and war stories of working the last 20 years of venture capital. When I started in the industry, not that I have that much gray hair, but when I started in the industry was the mid-90s. And that was a time that the dot-com industry, the genomics industry, venture capital business was the right place to be. In the last, there's been many different ups and downs in the industry, the bust of the dot-com industry, the 9/11 disaster, the recent recession. So the industry has changed fairly significantly. One of the key lessons that was learned through the dot-com industry was everybody thought if you threw money in a technology company that you could create significant wealth. And a lot of companies that were created through the dot-com industry ended up being complete busts. If anybody watched the Super Bowl of 2000, virtually all the commercials were of companies that no longer exist, who spent millions and millions of dollars on ads that went nowheres. So my expertise is primarily on, and effectively completely on, the agri-sciences. And what I thought I'd do today is talk about the two companies I work with, our experiences, what we've lived through, a little bit how those companies may help you, can help you, and also from our experience and living in some respects with the same challenges that many of the groups of companies who are raising money now, talk about how we approach fundraising. And what we've realized is the reality is fundraising is not the end goal. Fundraising is like dating. Once you raise the money, it's like getting married, then the real work starts. And it's a really up and down relationship. So the first company I'll talk about is Foragen. Foragen is one of a group of seed funds that was created by the Royal Bank. The Royal Bank had a venture capital group, and they felt in the late mid-90s that they needed to move down earlier stage into the seed funds, and created 4 seed funds, one in the dot-com space called eLab, one in the medical field called Milestone Medica, one in the engineering IT software called Primaxis, and the last one, Foragen, being in the agri-sciences space. With their thinking that there was a lot of opportunities, a lot of chances to create the next Googles, and I think hindsight they realized there's a lot more challenges in creating companies, but there's also a lot of great positive stories, and look forward to sharing those. Foragen itself focused on seed companies, which meant we were typically investing the first investor. We in some cases invested in technologies before the company invested, or we were the first investor in the Series A round, what we would call, after the angels have invested. So we invested early. So we've seen companies from concepts and ideas to some cases great success stories, and I'll tell you a few of them in a few moments, and in the other cases into some really difficult challenges. Our areas of focus were the agri-sciences. There's 7 areas identified, how we identified the subsectors. We did look at some forestry technologies, really never invested in those at that point. It was just a different environment. One of the things of note is how I came to know the Kirshner Private Capital Group is they are a corporate GP in Foragen and have been for the last 6 years. This is the Foragen portfolio. So Foragen initially saw over 600 deals, picked 10 companies, and if I was going to go back now, I would say, yeah, we did some good decisions, some bad decisions. We were there's a lot of good companies we missed as well, so I'm not going to pretend we were great, but I think we also picked some really good winners as well. There are 4 companies here that are highlighted. If you look on the bottom left, there's a company called Savina. That was a company that was spun off the University of Alberta, was eventually sold to Nutraceuticals, a Spanish company which I understand now has sold its stake to Naturex. Most of our portfolio has been sold. We're 4 remaining active companies, and they're the 4 highlighted in the box. The first one on the top right is MCN Bioproducts. MCN is a Saskatoon-based company that uses a byproduct from canola crushing, converts the canola meal into high-value fish meal replacement products. This $25 million plant that was built in northern Saskatchewan based on this technology that's running at 90% capacity selling more product and has a bunch of clients knocking at its door that would like more product, and they're actually selling it at a price that's 20% higher. This company is going very well and has a lot of interest in its technology. Next company on the right is Codina. Now, that's the former name. We invested initially, our investments were primarily in Canada with a few US companies. Codina was a Quebec-based company that produced a bio-pesticide and bio-insecticide. One of the learnings that we learned is we went through our second round of financing, and no investors were interested in Codina. And what we learned is it's really hard to finance a one-product company. And for us, it actually became a blessing in disguise. Codina we decided to roll it up with a company called AgriQuest out of Davis, California, out of another bio-pesticide company. AgriQuest has become a dominant player in the bio-insecticides. We are now a major shareholder in what I believe is one of the hottest markets in the whole bio-industries, which is bio-insecticides, with one of the premier players in the world. AgriQuest is trying to position itself for an IPO, and we're hopeful it will get there, although the IPO windows have been pretty tight these days. Third company is Chromatin. Chromatin is a Chicago-based company that produces mini chromosomes. So effectively what it is it's a gene stacking technology to incorporate multiple genes at one time into plants. That company has partnerships with Monsanto, Bayer, Syngenta, and Dow. So it has 80% of the partners in the world at its hands. It's been just nominated as one of the top 100 success stories of spin-out companies, which on that list included companies such as Google. It is increasing and growing extremely rapidly and is moving its technology into the bioenergy. The fourth company is Radiant Technologies. They utilize microwaves as a means to supplement solvent extraction to extract active compounds from various sources of biomaterial. They are currently working with a US pharmaceutical company producing a pharmaceutical active. They are working with multiple partners who have an interest in producing nutritional ingredients. These are the core companies that we have left in our portfolio. Because Foragen is in its 10th year of its life, we are limited and Foragen itself does not have the funds to invest in new companies. So anybody who has an interest in working with Foragen, the ways we can work with is via partnerships. So if you have an interesting bioinsecticide, I'm happy to do the introduction and working with to AgriQuest. If you have an interesting nutritional ingredient that you think maybe requires an interesting solvent extraction, happy to do an introduction to Edmonton-based Radiant. That's how we can help. As our portfolio becomes liquidated, the other group I'm working with is the Kirshner Private Capital Group. Like myself, the remainder of my colleagues at KPCG all have 20 years or more experience in growing, managing, and selling technology businesses. There are three elements to the business. I'll explain them in a few minutes, but there's effectively investment management, which is working like funds like Foragen. There's also transition management. So if a company needs some help, loss of a CEO, needing an interim CEO, need some support on the business development, and you need to work with somebody who, you can't afford a full-time VP of business development, but needs somebody who's seen many partnerships being structured, some good ones, some bad ones, and knows how to structure these deals and has the contacts. Those are the type of services we offer. And lastly is in investment banking in terms of how do you position companies for selling, how do you sell the companies, and actually managing the sale process. That's what the Kirshner Private Capital Group does. Through its investment management function, it is one of the partners in Avrio Ventures, Calgary-based Avrio Ventures, so they are managing a fund that will invest in the agri-sciences space. They are a little bit later stage and prefer to look at companies that are moving into the commercialization stage.